Horror and anime go together like Will and Jada, and that one just makes a complete fool out of the other. Bro, come on! As I discussed in my Dark Gathering video, please watch it. I'm a failing YouTuber and the cyanide is prepped. Horror and anime don't go together whatsoever, and that's in part because they all look like this. What the fuck's wrong with her face? Higurashi, while it does in fact look like this, how big is her tumor? Has the benefit of being filled with the most disturbing, visually gory things seen in an anime, in addition to having an enthralling mystery that spreads itself across 5 different seasons, which works in congress with the highly silly horror like beating up crippled people. It's okay, she can't feel anything down there. The anime is easily a modern day classic because of its aforementioned ability to tell a compelling narrative while simultaneously scarring you. I think I'm hard. And nowhere is that better shown than in the first season. From the beautifully written and well-directed first 4 episodes of the series to the absolute grotesque hilarity in the later episodes, she can walk it off. Higurashi has it all and masterfully serves its purpose of setting up its later seasons, most of which isn't thanks to the writing, as it accomplishes this gloriously while simultaneously befitting its own season in a vacuum. The mystery is established from the very beginning amidst telling smaller, localized stories for you to figure out whilst hinting at the larger overarching plot during them, dropping clues for you to put the pieces together along the way, even as far off into 2020 with the remake series. This in turn benefits the characters by establishing who they are and why they're enjoyable, hinting at their secrets all the while, of which are covered later on in their own respective answer arcs, but Season 1, unfortunately, only covers Rena, Rika, and Shion outside of K1's crazed rampages. However, it's in the literary elements where the anime truly shines, with the foreshadowing specifically being top-notch, allowing you to piece together the mysteries yourself from small clues left throughout the episodes. So much so that it even spoils the entire series as early as episode 2, but I'll cover it later on in the video due to it being such a massive spoiler, and instead talk about how much the writing excels at balancing the horror and comedic elements, something that the later remake seasons struggle with. It focuses heavily on the slice of life aspect a majority of the time, but that's purposely done to create a steady buildup of horror that's juxtaposed with the slice of life, making it all the more tense and scary when it finally happens, and, unlike its sequel, part of what makes both the comedy and horror succeed is because of how well the character designs and animation style lend themselves to both, dumbing down the detail of the designs to accentuate whatever current comedic scene is occurring, or amplifying the amount of detail in the facial expressions and contorting them into unholy looking creatures during the horror scenes. Wood. Separate from the narrative elements, the production as a whole, while a bit hit or miss depending on the person, serves the anime appropriately, standing out when it needs to and being subdued in most other cases. However, it's the first arc, of which encapsulates the first 4 episodes, where the production truly shines and all facets that composite the anime mesh cohesively into a fantastic arc and demonstrate what is a masterclass in how to properly do a mystery horror anime. The ambiance is handled exceedingly well throughout the entire series, but it's in this initial swath of episodes that it really nails down the harrowing feel that is the absolute void of silence that's inevitably pierced by the sound of screeching cicadas during almost every scene, priming you to naturally tense up upon hearing the cicadas, anticipating something to come, but never knowing when because it's used for normal scenes as much as it is the more horror-aligned ones. It fills you with a sense of dread and doubt throughout the scenes that play and place you in the same shoes as Keiichi, who, in this arc, is slowly losing his mind, even though he does that every arc. When comparing it to its sequel, Go, whose first arc is almost a shot-for-shot remake, the original demonstrates the best way to slowly build up the horror over the course of several episodes and intrinsically understands how to use shot composition, music, and creative directing to sell a scene. While Go opts for the Rena questioning scene in episode 3, episode 2 of the original, to be rather flat with just cuts back and forth between the 2 characters' perspectives, suddenly zooming in to accentuate the creepiness and continuing to focus on Rena's mouth as it goes on to get the point across, the original opts for a constantly moving scene and shifting tone, showing the characters from different, more creative angles that keep the tension moving as it begins to unnerve you, just as Rena is doing to K1 as she pounds him with question after question, instilling within him the fear that he's being watched, illustrated to the audience through the faster and faster camera pans between the 2 before suddenly and violently jerking to Rena and her It's the perfect crescendo that's capped off by Rena's sudden 180 heel turn back to being sickly sweet, which doubles up on the unease for the rest of the episode and arc, exactly as it is for Keiichi. It's masterfully produced, and this arc, unlike any other, shows exactly what goes through the head of someone who's suffering from stage 5 Hinamizawa syndrome, the disease that makes the characters go on murder sprees. But it doesn't make them stupid, that's just K1. Hey K1, how's it going? I didn't kill anyone! Okay, what a weirdo. It's only in this arc where you can see firsthand the thoughts, distrust, and hallucinations of a victim suffering from the disease as you see K1 progressively become more distrusting from a misunderstanding, get injected with the disease to accelerate its effects, and then begin hallucinating things that aren't actually happening, ending in the tragedy of, well, eating his meat a little too hard. The arc in its entirety helps to illustrate how well the anime team understood the assignment, and while the later parts of the season are in contention from those who read the source material due to how the anime cut out key clues needed to solve the overarching plot, leading to the short anime-only arc in the beginning of Kai to add them back in that was crafted from the original author himself, the anime as a whole does a fine job at presenting the story and enhancing it for its new medium despite that. The lack of key details does hurt the season in a vacuum, which I'll soon elaborate on, but for the series as a whole, it hardly impacts it when considering the fact that Season 2 rectifies the issues immediately upon its start. The pro to doing so as well is that it allows for theory crafting of the many plausible explanations the arcs lend themselves to, leading to the anime ultimately getting the most out of its mystery aspect inadvertently, and thus making it so that the anime is not only a perfectly fine way to experience the franchise, but also a fun experience in its own right, one that's proven to stand the test of time even when compared to other horror anime greats like Shiki and Dark Gathering, with absolutely nothing wrong with the animation whatsoever. Ignore that. The later arcs are no slouch either, and, unlike Go, are able to take you from the ending of one arc to the beginning of the next without feeling the whiplash of going from something really gory and fucked up to sudden fun slice of life school time. And it's that ability to mix the two polar opposites that enables the anime to hide key details in the otherwise seemingly inconsequential comedy segments, with the perfect example being spotted in a brief gag scene in episode 2, like I mentioned prior, with major spoilers coming ahead, where Mion, when playing a game of Clue or some such similar game, spoils the entire plot of the next 3 seasons, revealing that the suspect is Rika, someone who is, in part, causing the loops and presented as an ominous presence throughout the series. It is actually a red herring for the real villain, before then revealing the murder weapon to be poison, alluding to the injection that accelerates Hinamizawa syndrome and the disease itself, and finally that the scene of the crime is the nurse's office, indicating where the serum originates from and who the real villain has been all along. It's all done in such a nothing scene used for a seemingly throwaway gag, yet it focuses on it for long enough that it starts making you guess, and that's what makes it a 10 out of 10, just like Rika.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
That said, no anime is without fault, and regardless of how well this season portrays the horror through its visual medium, like the direction utilizing subtle, suggestive, and natural cues to do so, it still has a major issue in its pacing. Of the 8 arcs that comprise the original visual novel, the first season of the anime adapts 6 of them, 3 question arcs and 3 answer arcs, all in one go. This is to its detriment though, as you go from these thrilling mysteries that make you question more and more, hence why they're colloquially dubbed question arcs, as you watch the characters descend into madness, capping it off with tons of reveals in Rika's arc alongside high-octane action of a fat guy fighting people, whilst also hinting that there may be higher godlike forces in play, to then come to a screeching halt in Shion's arc, where it spends 6 episodes laboriously laying out every minute detail of her mystery, the backstory for Shion and Satoshi, Satoko's older brother, and many other events that had been mentioned up until this point. It was already the case that some mystery arcs were better than others, such as the first arc with K1 and the third arc with Satoko's abuse, but that becomes an exacerbated issue when so much time is dedicated to answering the second, which was the easiest of the bunch to figure out. But man, I wish I were that towel. While some of it is engaging, namely the reveals about Satoshi and Satoko's family and how he brutally murdered their aunt, alongside how Shion's family is responsible for many of the disappearances during the Cotton Drifting Festival to quietly remove those who went against them during the dam incident, most of it is just repeating things the audience either already knows or has already figured out. Where the question arc kept you teeming with anticipation of where it will go next, and even Rika and Rena's arcs, the latter of which comes after this Shion one, are able to present more clues while answering burning questions viewers already had, this Shion arc drags for way too long, even though its prior pace had moved so quick, and it's that whiplash that makes it a very unfun 6 episodes, except for when Shion is hella based. It does contain some of the series' scariest, creepiest, and goriest moments, but those brief scenes don't assuage the boredom it lambasts you with, and although the next arc that caps off the season is back to the quality of the prior arcs, the season in general, especially as it goes on, embodies the biggest issue of the entire franchise, the innate goofiness.
What's she not telling?
It's something that the sequel series, Go and Sotsu, are criticized heavily for, but I've found it to not only be present here as well, but that it's also arguably worse than it is in the sequels, because this first season takes itself completely seriously in comparison to its successors that are largely just taking the piss. And it doesn't help that, with how the animation style tends to portray the characters during horror scenes with their contorted faces, that it causes it to be more hilarious than scary, which I've been subtly memeing on this entire video. Personally, I find that to be a part of the charm of the series, alongside the rather stilted voice direction. But the issue is that, from what I've gathered, that's not the intention they were going for, despite being omnipresent throughout all its iterations. And while there are certainly more comparisons to be made to the sequels, I'm gonna save them for the inevitable video later on down the line, and instead say that, while it definitely has its faults in some facets as mentioned, it still manages to set everything up perfectly while still being immensely entertaining for the most part, be it in a funny way or a scary way. It may kill its own momentum in one arc only to regain it in the next and continue to become more asininely silly with every arc and plot twist, but that's what makes it the GOAT that stands out amongst all the rest, creating this infectious charm that you can't peel your eyes away from, even if it doesn't always stem from positive aspects, thus making it, even if it's a bit facetious, the undisputed king of horror anime.